Welcome to Mamas in Training, a podcast that gives new moms guidance and community from moms who have been there. I'm Jessica Lorian, a mama in training myself, so let's learn together all about this thing called motherhood.
Later on, I was able to say to my husband, that's the only picture we'll have of all four of us. That's the only ones that will ever exist. We were all four together. It doesn't matter when it occurs, and there's a part of you that goes, maybe losing them that early was a blessing to have had less time to be attached, but there's no rational timeline on love.
This week is very special because I'm bringing back a guest from the first season of what was the Pumping podcast, Mama Tara Snyder. Before we begin, I want to give you a trigger warning because this is a hard episode to listen to. We're talking about loss. However, there is a positive rainbow on the other side of this episode, so I encourage you to listen. But if it's not for you at this time, just click on to the next one. Tara is the mom to an adorable little toddler, but recently she experienced miscarriage. It was really important for her and to myself to have her share her story. So if any of you out there have experienced this, you know that you're not alone. So I am so pleased to reintroduce you to Tara Snyder. It is a privilege to sit down with this amazing woman from episode 14, entitled Mamas in Academia. We sat down with Tara and two other professors from the University of Central Florida to talk about moms in academia, and I wanted to bring her back for a very special episode today. So thank you so much, Tara, for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jessica.
Thank you for your vulnerability.
Absolutely. It's something you never want to find yourself in this group. And if you ever do find yourself in this group, and I suspect the moms who are continuing to listen on to this episode have probably found themselves in this group, if they're ready to listen to this, it's basically to know that you're not damaged, you're not alone, and while that ache in your heart's never gonna completely heal, at least on this side of heaven, in my personal view, that knowing that there are other people who've been there does somehow make it a little bit easier to bear, and knowing that there is someone else who feels that same way that you felt and just says, I'm here, I understand, I can't make it better, nobody can, but I'm here for you. I'm here to let you know that it's happened to me too. It just does give some sense of reassurance when you're in the midst.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really empowering when women do that because it's something that nobody should have to go through. But unfortunately, it's something, I don't know what the percentage is. I will say just on my episode, and I've interviewed upwards of 60 people now, I would probably venture to guess about 80% of them have experienced miscarriage. So at what point did you decide it was time to try for another?
So he was born in 2017, and really I'd say by 2019, I personally was thinking, I don't want there to be a huge gap between children. I'd still like to have another child. My husband and I had to come to looking at things in the same view. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen right away. So we didn't really actively start trying until 2020. And that's, of course, when, unfortunately, as women get older, our fertility does diminish. And it's kind of like, all right, I'm already an older mom, because OB world, they'll term you as a geriatric pregnancy once you're past 35. So, I was already a geriatric pregnancy the first time around. So, going into 2020, that's when, unfortunately, we discovered that we were not being successful immediately, and went to a reproductive endocrinologist and was diagnosed with some signs of diminished ovarian reserve, which, if the listeners are not familiar with it, basically means that there's a limited supply of eggs left, but they can't say exactly how many because the number that they use to diagnose that, the AMH level, indicates how many eggs there are, I think, in about like 6 months from the time that that's taken. So it's looking at a future date, so it can't really tell how many there are in the interim. But when the number gets low, mine was 0.44. It's not good. Basically, once you get below 1, the chances are going down significantly. And so it kind of took, a while for my husband and I to decide, okay, what do we want to do with this information? One thing became pretty clear right off the bat for us was that in vitro, which is what frequently is suggested when you have things like age as a factor and diminished variant reserve as a factor, was really not going to be possible because financially we simply could not handle it. And, there's insurance won't cover that. The bare minimum, and this can vary by area depending on where people are listening, but bare minimum costs, you're looking at probably anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000 to try once. And that may not even be successful. And given how they go through the process to stimulate the body to get ready for in vitro, when you're already someone with diminished ovarian reserve, the likelihood that you're going to be able to stimulate the number of eggs they need to collect to even have a successful harvest, it's not good. Your chances are not good to get what they need even in that one shot. So you've spent maybe $20,000 on literally nothing except a lot of medication and kind of making yourself go crazy with the hormone levels that the medications are going to send you through. So we did figure out pretty quickly that was not going to work. And we were asking, well, is there something not as intense as that, anything that we can try? And so we were given the suggestion of trying a medicated cycle with timed intercourse to do a few cycles of that before the doctor would say we need to do something more aggressive. And of course, behind the scenes, we were kind of saying we're not interested in the more aggressive, not only from a financial standpoint, but even some issues we had with possibly the how the embryo is created and us trying to reconcile that with our own personal belief system. Not against anybody doing that, but just for us. So we were thinking, okay, well, maybe we try this medication with, the TI, as they call it, and see what happens. So we finally decided we would try that. And that was in June that we decided we would try it. So we had the diagnosis in March. It took us a while to kind of decide what we wanted to do and be okay with it. Also knowing that the medication for this, because it involved some shots of gonal F, which it helps stimulate growth of the egg once the egg is generated and released. So that was also not going to be covered by insurance. So that medication alone, that and also a trigger shot, as they would say, to make sure that the egg's released within a certain time, ended up being around $1,000 for 1 month. So that gives you an idea of the cost. And that's with getting discounts from specific pharmacies designed for people dealing with fertility issues that have set a certain price with, this particular reproductive endocrinologist. So we decided, okay, we're going to do it. I'll give myself the shots. And of course, that makes you a little loopy because the hormones are, raging in a much more concentrated format. And, we were overjoyed to discover that we had been successful on the first try. And the reproductive endocrinologist was actually kind of shocked that it worked the first time for us. So, that's, we discover that we're successful. And, once you get the positive pregnancy test, they bring you in for blood work to check and see if your HCG level is rising. So I went in for the first check on that, and then they make you come back 2 days later to make sure it's doubled. It had. And this is all part of kind of leading up to what eventually happened. I was having a little bit of spotting that week. And of course, there's a part in your brain that freaks out and is like, there shouldn't be anything coming out down there. A friend here is a lifeline for me and kind of part of my inspiration for talking in the podcast. I was texting her, I was sending her pictures of things. because she had been through 2 miscarriages herself and was pregnant at that time. But she was saying, her first successful pregnancy, and she also had dealt with a lot of infertility, that she had spotting, that it could be normal despite the fact that it doesn't seem like it. And so it allayed my fears, for a little bit. And we had like a really joyous weekend away for our 10th wedding anniversary. And we came back from that, and like later that week after we were back, we even took pictures together as a family. And one of the pictures that we took, I had taken the pregnancy test, and I was, we took a picture with it, and we had thought we were going to use that to announce the pregnancy to family and friends. So that was on a Friday. And late, like I felt very tired that Friday night, a little bit dizzy, but it's also Florida, and it was hot, and it was July, and we had been outside for a while. And so I just kind of chalked it up to that. It was fairly early on in the pregnancy. So that then on Saturday, I woke up and I was having some spotting again. And, the previous week when I'd had the spotting, they said, go on pelvic rest, which means, no lifting, no activities that really engage that area. And so I basically spent kind of all of Saturday just sitting in a chair and thinking, I'm dealing with this again. I checked in with the RE's office, and they said, unless it becomes heavier, starts filling a pad, it's not something we're really going to worry about yet. It, could be normal. I mean, they won't guarantee that it's normal. But so that's where my mind was thinking, okay, it's just happening again. I was just trying to be calm and relax and take it easy that day. And I woke up around just after midnight, so on early Sunday morning. I went to the bathroom and I turned on the light, and I thought, okay, this is going to tell me when I go to the bathroom, if I, wipe and there's more blood, then I need to be concerned. And so I went, and now the blood was bright red, which was another indication of a problem. And there was more of it. And so I woke my husband up and I said, I'm going to the hospital. There's more blood. It's bright red. This is what they said I should do. If reasons, and to make sure that if I needed to get a RhoGAM shot, which is to keep you from rejecting a pregnancy in case the baby's blood type and your blood type aren't the same, that I would be able to get that from an ER, during off hours. So there was no choice. He couldn't come with me, because not only because we had a sleeping toddler in the other room, but also because of COVID protocols, he wouldn't have been allowed to come in with me anyway. So I had no choice but to take myself to the hospital. So, I get to the hospital. Of course, it's the wee hours of the morning, and I'm explaining to them what's going on. So, they take me back right away, and the first thing they wanted me to do was do a pregnancy test, just a urine test. And while I'm trying to do that, this is going to get graphic, and I'm sorry for the listeners who might be a little squeamish, but there's like streams of blood coming out, and I was praying very hard that everything would be okay, but there was also that part of my brain that's like, I shouldn't be seeing streams of blood. This is like, something is wrong. So the next, I can't give you a detailed breakdown of every moment of the next hours, but I basically spent the whole night in the hospital, and there are flashes in my mind of particularly bad images of waiting for someone to check the results. They wanted to do an ultrasound to see what they could see, but before they even came back to do the ultrasound, the ER doctor, came to talk with me, and he said, if we went, and they had taken blood because they were looking for, HCG levels in the blood and things like that. And he came in and said, if we just went by the urine test, we would say you're not pregnant because it was negative. But the blood test came back and your level was at 4. And basically, in terms of what they look for pregnancy, anything under 5 is considered not pregnant. But I said, I know the level was at 70, like a week, over a week ago. Yeah. So, that's when it started to sink into my mind that the pregnancy is gone. But I still had to go through the ultrasound, and I had to like go to the bathroom before they would do the ultrasound. And I have one very visceral image that sometimes flashes into my mind that I try to push out periodically, of just blood. Just, I see it, like I can see myself on the toilet, in the bathroom, just blood. And, there's still that tiny hope, thinking, is there any possibility it's still there? And then having to lay there in the room by myself, waiting, for them to get a hold of the reproductive endocrinologist's office to talk to somebody on duty to ask whether they should give me a full ROGAM shot or a mini shot before they send me on my way, seeing paperwork that says inevitable miscarriage as the diagnosis, having to call my husband and tell him, what the result was, and basically the baby's gone. They couldn't see anything in the ultrasound. There's nothing left. There's nothing there to see, because at about 5 weeks, which is what I was, 5 weeks, 2 days, I believe, at that point, at the earliest, ultrasounds might only see a gestational sac. They're not really going to see a baby no matter what. So they weren't seeing anything. And I just, I had to ask them. I said, could you please get me, I said, could I have some ginger ale or some water? I'm so thirsty and I feel sick. And they brought like the little tiny box of tissue, and I was supposed to be wearing my mask, but I had to keep taking it down to cry and blow my nose. And, bless the nurses, they didn't say anything, because I couldn't function in that moment. And I'm, the listeners won't be seeing this, but Jessica can see what's happening to my eyes as I kind of relive some of this. And, I was reading my Bible app. I was listening to verses to try to give me a sense of peace. And I think in some ways it did, but also that sense of loss, a loss that I didn't want, that I didn't know how deeply could affect me, that started settling in. And yet there was still a part of my mind that's like, you're supposed to work on Tuesday teaching online. You're going to need to cancel. And things that popped into my mind of things that I had to do.
That to-do list, yeah.
Right. Like, you started a baby registry. You need to cancel it. Like,
oh, gosh, yeah.
Those kinds of, like, having to text the people that I was supposed to work for the next week, and just, I couldn't even bring myself to write Miscarriage. I just said, I've had a major medical trauma. I am so sorry. I am not going to be able to teach for you. I wanted to let you know. And I literally was doing this as I left the hospital, because there wasn't much turnaround time, and I didn't want them to be inconvenienced.
Oh, gosh.
That's your mind's not rational. I felt like a failure, because, there's the part of your brain that goes, what did I do wrong? Did I push myself too hard by trying to go take those pictures? And then, like, the pictures, that was another message that I sent as I was leaving the hospital to our friend who'd taken the pictures. I said, when you put up the pictures, can you please not put up any of the ones with the pregnancy test? I said, we've just lost the pregnancy. I can't bear to look at them. I said, maybe you could save them, because someday I might want to see them. If you're okay with that, please don't delete them, but I just can't look at them.
Yeah.
And later on, when she had put up some of the pictures from the photo shoot, and we were all so happy. It was mostly supposed to be a photo shoot of my husband and I for our 10th anniversary. But, when you have a toddler, you don't always have the luxury of putting them somewhere else. He is very photogenic, and I love looking at him. But, there was a picture of my husband and I swinging Robbie between us. And this was later on, I was able to say to my husband, that's the only picture we'll have of all four of us. That's the only ones that will ever exist. Mm. We were all four together. It doesn't matter when it occurs. If you get the positive pregnancy test and you go to have the blood draw, and like 2 days later you have the next blood draw and it's not going up, you already know it's going to be called a chemical pregnancy, which just feels like a slap in the face to call it that instead of a loss. Yeah. And there's a part of you that goes, maybe losing them that early was a blessing to have had less time to be attached, but there's no rational timeline on love. I wanted to have something to always, it's not that I will ever forget that child, because I won't, but I wanted something visceral so that I could always know that baby had been real, that pregnancy had been real. Because when I was you're dealing with grief and it has all its stages and anger. And I threw away the pregnancy test because I didn't want to be reminded of them. I ordered an angel bear from Vermont that makes these beautiful bears. And they happened to have one. It was an angel. And I thought that's appropriate. That's what I want. So I ordered the angel bear, and I wrote and set it up like it was a gift, even though it was a gift for me, and said, in remembrance and memory of our baby, and July 26th, 2020, the day that they were gone.
I love what you said. There's no timeline on love and connection. Yeah. It's so beautifully put. And I know that in every stage of some sort of a trauma, your mind does run in so many different directions. But the last thing that I want to really make sure that anybody who's listening who has recently gone through this, or even if you went through it years ago and it's still hard to dive into, your experience is valuable. Your experience is important to share. And your experience is 100% yours. And no matter what anyone else has gone through, that doesn't diminish it at all. And
Right.
I know people who have gotten the pregnancy test and lost the child a week. I know somebody who lost their child the week before he was about to be due, and the hospital bags were packed, and everything in between. And so, yes, of course, there's that timeline of three months that's suggested to wait. But at the end of the day, just follow what's best for you. And when you want to share that news with people and how it's best for you to handle those different things. And the most important thing is your experience was valuable, and your experience was just as valuable as anyone else's. And loss, no matter what form it comes in, is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to go through it and to take the time to grieve. And that's why I was so grateful that you wanted to share with us, because it's going to be painful no matter when you're experiencing it or when you're going back through it. So I just hope that hearing your story has helped some other people know that they're not alone. I mean, this is not talked about, and I don't want it to be muted. Miscarriage should be talked about just as much as anything else is.
Yes.
Because then people don't feel ashamed. It has nothing to do with you. Right. It's not in your hands. It's not in your control.
And my husband said, for him, it really brought home the fact how much he did want the child, have it pulled away like that. I also wanted to mention a book called A Grace Disguised. And I was trying to see if I could see it in my office here. It's somewhere. And it was written by a man who lost 3 generations of his family in a single moment in a car accident.
Wow.
But it's exploring loss and grief and how that is a universal thing, even if how it manifests may not, be common, that all of us will experience loss. All of us will experience grief, and we can't compare what happened. It is unique, but that the feelings are universal, and kind of how he worked through it. It was helpful as I read the pieces and, once again connected with that universal sense of loss, and what do you do to live your life past that moment.
Yeah, it gave you like a tool to focus on, to sort of what is the next step to help me get through this. I'll put that link to the book and the author in the show notes, so if anyone wants to check it out, they can there. Well, can you finish off our story telling us the good news?
Yeah, so I think another thing besides time and sharing and being able to be there for other people, I've actually now been the person on the other end of the text. But another thing I think that has really helped us is that, so in the cycle that happened kind of as a result right after the miscarriage, we missed the windows to do medication. So we were very shocked to discover we were pregnant again in the cycle right after the miscarriage. I guess that's also another silver lining that comes out of that. There is some, I don't know if it's anecdotal or not fully vetted research, but that shows women tend to be more fertile after a loss.
Mm.
So someone who had been diagnosed with, signs of diminished ovarian reserve and not given very good odds for getting pregnant, even with medication intervention, here we are pregnant without any intervention. Well, God's intervention in you look at it, but
yeah,
no,
have that faith. Don't let that
yeah,
faith die.
no. And so then, we're calling up the reproductive endocrinologist. We're pregnant. I'm in for blah. And they were like, and you didn't do any I'm like, no, we didn't do any medication. So then being, making it to the same point that we made it with the last one, and being like, okay, we made it past the point of the last pregnancy, and then we made it to the first early scan and saw the little tiny flickering heartbeat, and then made it to the next. They did another scan 2 weeks later, and to see, oh yes, there has been development, and now there's a tiny little arm waving at us, and see, yes, it has continued to grow, and the heart rate is strong, and taking the genetic testing and everything's coming up low risk and looking good. And so that's the positive, the rainbow after the storm, that we do have our rainbow baby on board, and it's a little boy.
Oh.
But having that rainbow has made it, I think, easier in some ways to face some of the pain of what came before, and to also know that there's somebody waiting to meet me someday who'll run up to me and say, "Mommy, I've missed you. I'm so happy to see you."
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I know that's still to come, and that I'm gonna have 2 little boys running around. 2021, that rainbow has helped our hearts to heal.
Oh, it's just beautiful. I love the way that you just said that. You're making me cry. Oh my
We
gosh.
both are. Good thing we're not wearing mascara, because woo!
Exactly. Yeah, that's just stunning. I think too, I want to encourage women, if you want to be a mom, if you are a mom and you want to be a mom again, just don't lose the faith. I've seen this happen so many times, and I know it's easier said than done. Here I am, the ignorant non-mama, but we have a family friend who they tried for 7 years. They went through all the things. They spent all the money, and they gave up. And then they just went ahead and had sex, and whoop, she got pregnant.
Yeah.
And now just recently, she had her second. So I think just don't lose the faith. Be kind to yourself, and if you need to give yourself that moment of pause or that break, don't have the stress come into it, because I don't think that helps. But you are living proof that you went through the steps that you needed to take, but then without the medical steps, it happened. And I just think that's a beautiful God wink, and that's a beautiful message that we can all take to keep that faith and keep it strong. But I just don't want the women who know that they're destined to be a mom to give up on it because of what the medical world says or what they might be experiencing.
You just never know. The miracle of life is that. And there are people who may realize that their path to being a mom is adoption.
Yes.
That may be the answer. That's the child that's waiting for them. But I think, as you said, to not give up, but it's also okay to change what you want. So
exactly.
If that path and you realize, I can't keep doing this pattern of things, it's stressing me out, it's taking my health and my joy and the focus in life right now. Because I've seen people in some of these groups that I'm in online who literally their relationship has fallen apart. So
right. Yeah, you have to focus
it can't
on what's
become
most important.
Yeah, it can't become that, I think. So there is hope. There is a rainbow after the storm. And if you're still in the storm, that's okay. Nobody can tell you when it's time to come out of the storm. Know that there are sisters who will sit in the storm with you, because they know where you've been. And I think that's another great thing that has come out of me sharing my story publicly is how many women either commented on it or contacted me behind the scenes to say, yes, that was also me.
I'm sure anyone who's listening, if you want to reach out to Tara, all of her information to get in touch will be in the show notes, because I think that's the most important thing, is finding somebody or finding a group of people to be on the other end of that text, like you mentioned, and to answer that call. We can only lift each other up. That's all we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting by sharing your story like you did today. So I'm so grateful for you, Tara. And I know many people listening will be as well. And I hope that this helps them. What is something that you'd like to tell your children now for when they're 18?
We'll be so excited to share with Mark. That's the new one who's on board, who's actually named after my brother-in-law who died of brain cancer. So it's
beautiful
to him. But how desperately he is loved, how much he is wanted, and that will be so happy to have watched he and Robbie grow up as brothers together and love and care for one another. And with both of them, that you have a sibling who's waiting for you in heaven someday, and that's going to be the joyful part of that, is that you'll get to meet that other sibling who didn't get to share that time with you on earth and that love on earth, but who knows, and who will be there for you one day.
If you're looking for more episodes to comfort you regarding loss, miscarriage, and infertility, you can check out episode 10, entitled Loss and Overcoming Birth Complications, with Paige Copel. And if you're experiencing infertility, you can check out episode 19, entitled Infertility, You Are Not Alone, with Bree Chudd, where she shares her story. I hope you find some comfort in these episodes and know that you truly are not alone. If you enjoyed the show today, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts so I know how to better serve you. I'd also love for you to join our community of Mamas in Training on Facebook. You can find me at Mamas in Training on Instagram and at mamasintraining.com. For Mamas in Training, I'm Jessica Lorian. We're in this together.